the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
So Vince, when we're talking about this, and speaking of Orwellian, the Inflation Reduction Act, Chuck Schumer, Joe Manchin have introduced this. Is this going to reduce inflation? What's it going to do to taxes? What's it going to do about government spending? And ultimately, other than just putting a title out there about Inflation Reduction Act, why are Democrats so adamant about this horrifically bad bill?
Okay, so I guess it's probably worth stepping back for a moment and assessing how do we get inflation, just as a basic thing. And inflation is always too much money chasing too few goods. So if there's too much money in the economy and too few things to purchase, then that's going to change how much everything costs. It gets more expensive. If you're the banker sitting at the Monopoly board and you all of a sudden start handing out a couple $100s of Monopoly money all around the board, when you start horse trading between each other about who's going to buy what property on the board, everything is skyrocketed in terms of how expensive it is, because everybody has so much money to spend in that environment. So it's just basic principles here. Now, there's two reasons we get inflation, though, ultimately, in terms of the top level control. One is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve printing out endless sums of money has created a tremendous amount of inflation. The left said this would never happen. They can just print as much money as they need and it'd be fine. It's not true. They call it modern monetary theory. It's a dumpster fire. It just ruins the economy. And we've been through it. And now we've experienced it. That test is over. Stop it. The other side is Congress, where you work. So Congress passes massive spending bills. And it turns out we are in such massive debt. There is no revenue to finance the congressional spending. So they need the Federal Reserve to print more money to make this work at all. So when Joe Manchin comes along after having promised that he wouldn't sign up for anything that would increase inflation, can't hurt West Virginians, all of a sudden now he's for what he's referring to as the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, this thing, based on any educated assessment, will not reduce inflation at all. Penn Wharton has just come out with a study that says that it will actually increase inflation as it begins to go into effect. And then it will have no impact whatsoever in their assessment on inflation. I happen to think that's wrong. I think it'll be much higher than Penn Wharton's predicting. I think it will have a meaningful inflationary impact. Yeah. And then you got the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is saying not only are we seeing that we will get some inflation out of this, but it will raise taxes on everyone, thus violating the Biden pledge, which he's violated routinely, of not raising taxes on anybody under $400,000. Everybody's going to take it in the shorts. And the reason for that is because if you impose this 15% minimum tax on corporations, which is what this bill would do, everyone with half a brain knows that those expenses are going to have to be found somewhere. They're going to have to be found. So what does a company need to do? One, cut back on wages or fire employees. That's how you handle a massive new expense. Two is you pass off those expenses to your customers. In other words, the customers of those products end up paying those taxes. So in the end, it is a shell game designed to conceal that the poorest people in America are going to pay the heaviest burden as a percentage of their income for this type of legislation. It's a scam. It's a total scam. So when you say Inflation Reduction Act, you're lying. It increases inflation, it increases taxes, it increases expenses, and it doesn't get us out of the mess that Washington got us into the first place.
Well, with it being so bad, and I agree with you on every point, that's the way I read it as well. With this bill being so bad, why are they insisting on going forward with it? Because they will be held accountable by voters. And I'm with you. I think that when this goes through, it will have an almost immediate increase in inflationary pressure. And that's before the bill actually will be fully effective. But that's because businesses immediately start taking actions to deal with the negative consequences of this bill.
Totally.
They don't wait. So why? Well, I mean, why?
Well, there is a immense desire to put a single victory up on the scoreboard for the Biden administration. They have loss after loss. I mean, if you were to survey your constituents right now and say, hey, what has the Biden administration done for you? Even if you don't like the guy, can you name one thing that he's improved your life with? And there are no answers to that question. You'll get blank stares. Like, I can't think of anything. And that's for good reason. They have been an unmitigated disaster from the moment they came into office. Even before he came into office, he was promising things like, I'm not going to deport anyone. That opened the floodgates on the border, as you know. And so this is a moment. It's a dangerous moment because what you have is a very desperate Democrat Party who is clawing for something to hold on to. And so they're kind of going back and forth between, well, we should call all Republicans extremists and suggest that they're super dangerous and that if they're given power, that'd be the end of America because we don't have a positive thing to run on. So we have to run on something negative. We have to turn our political opponents into boogeymen. Or alternatively, we've got to figure out a way to suck up at least to the most radical elements of our base, because if we don't, they're not going to show up on election day for us. So as you look at these approval ratings for Biden right now, and Kamala Harris is even worse, understand it's not just, I know you understand this, but I just want to convey it. It's not just people like you and I who think that the left is the wrong direction for the country and they're mad about the economy. There's also a component of that disapproval, which is Biden's hard left, the 10% of the country or so, who thinks that he's not being crazy enough. Right. And so there is a portion that wants to see him, break down the institutions, and smash through all of these barriers in the Senate and the filibuster and on and on and on, the United States Supreme Court. And if he can do that, then maybe they'll show up. So some of the craziest ideas are really designed to appeal to the craziest people. Yeah,
man, I'll tell you, that is scary. That is really scary. And what's scary to me is I actually work with people who have that very idea in Congress. And I tell people this all the time. They say, why don't you work more with the Democrats? And I said, well, because the Democrats are about as hard left as you can get. And here's an example. Just a couple of years ago, the Progressive Caucus might have had 20, 25 people in it. Today, it's over 100 people. It's half of the Democrats are in the most radical caucus you can be in the United States Congress.
And are they actually progressive? What does progressive mean? Because all these people who call themselves progressive, have you noticed that they all align themselves with America's most left-wing corporations all the time? Like they're constantly in bed with corporate interests who are actually sabotaging the United States routinely. So the whole thing is like one giant lie. Oh, we're progressive. Like, really? You serve the little people? I thought that was the point of progressive, was to be like, I'm looking out for the interests of the common man. That's not happening at all. You're like serving the most elite corrupt interests in the country. How can you call yourselves, quote, progressive, whatever that means?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about speaking of progressives, woke people who actually made a bunch of money. Looks like on insider trading with regard to the CHIPS Act. And I won't get into this, but that's Nancy Pelosi. Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi, who's Speaker of the House, going to Taiwan. Yeah. Do you think she made the right call to go to Taiwan?
I don't know. It seems to me that this was a really fraught decision that has no clear mission. Like normally when you do something that's this flashy as a representative of the United States, you would do it with some sort of intention in mind. She's never really laid out what the mission was. It was just like, hey, I'm here, and this like proves that we're standing with Taiwan. Does it? I don't know, because it seems like what all the effect was really just to inflame the region, we already, it's not a question. It's not like it's some invention that China is our leading adversary. It is. And that's not a mystery to anybody on either side of the Pacific. So we're in the midst of exhausting tremendous amount of resources in Ukraine right now. We are about as stretched thin as we can be. We've lost, unfortunately, if the United States Navy has conducted war games to assess how we would stand up against the Chinese if there was a battle. in the Pacific over Taiwan. And I hate to tell you, but we keep losing in our own war games. And so with that in mind, is it an intelligent thing to do to inflame that relationship right now at this moment? And are there better ways to be confronting China? For instance, cutting off Chinese influence in the United States, stopping the proliferation of TikTok, cutting off Chinese foreign nationals who are constantly committing acts of espionage in the United States at our upper level institutions, like actually, exerting some of her power as Speaker of the House to do things that are important, looking for the origins of COVID and the money that went into Wuhan in the first place. You want to stick it to the Chinese, actually do something to hold them accountable instead of a performance, which seemed to be a giant self-aggrandizing act that I'm not sure there is tremendous upside to, and there could be meaningful downside.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that today already. China's responded by firing very targeted missiles near Taiwan.
Yes.
And and this, I'll just tell you, for the last year and a half, this is not new to see the Chinese invade the airspace of Taiwan. It's not unusual to see them conduct military naval training exercises, just really rolling around Taiwan. But I don't have a problem with members of Congress going to Taiwan. Taiwan's a trading partner and a strategic partner in Northeast Asia.
Yes.
But the problem is this was handled so clunkily, and as you say, there was no stated objective. But what there was is, from a month before that Pelosi goes over there was Biden saying, "No, the Pentagon doesn't want you to go."
And the White House was in on this crap. The White House was in on it because it's all military aircraft. It's all controlled by Biden. So remember, if like this idea, well, we can't control her travel. Yes, you can. Do you remember the Trump administration when Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of your Democrat colleagues, they tried to go to Afghanistan, a congressional delegation in the middle of a shutdown, and Donald Trump said, "No, you're not going anywhere." And he canceled all their flights, and they ended up just sitting in a bus outside of the Capitol building. First of all, it was
great.
It was hilarious. But secondly, it's a sign the president does have the ability to stop this. And the White House being like, look, our hands are tied. We can't do this. And then trying to convince the Chinese that Nancy Pelosi isn't that important. It was all so ridiculous.
Yeah. We're just about out of time, everybody who's watching, but this is the great Vince Colonnese from WMAL, from Daily Caller. You've seen him on TV. This great man. I wish we had another hour because there's so much to talk about what's happening.
Totally.
And I feel, and we actually pulled the plug on a couple of topics that I really wanted to get to. But here's how you get a hold of Vince at Twitter at Vince Colonnese. And Vince, I'm going to spell it for people because
that's good.
Vince Coglianese at Instagram at DeVince. DVCince, DVCINCE, my own social media, Twitter at Rep Andy Biggs AZ, Instagram at Rep Andy Biggs, Facebook at Congressman Andy Biggs, Truth at Rep Andy Biggs AZ, www.biggs.house.gov. You can follow the audio version of this on Spotify, What's the Biggs Idea, or on Apple Podcast at What's the Biggs Idea. Vince, thanks so much for being with us. We got cut off there for a sec, but I would encourage everybody, every chance you get, to listen to Vince at WMAL. He's just a conservative voice, but he's so not just well informed, but he is smart, articulate, capable. Great to have you on today, Vince. Thanks so much.
Very nice. Thank you, Congressman. It was my pleasure. Really appreciate this.
Yeah. Have a great one the rest of the day.
You too, sir.